everybody. We are the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. I am Dr. Kristen.
And I'm Dr. Erin.
And you are so exceptionally welcome to our little corner of the internet for our discussion of The Handmaid's Tale, Season 5, Episode 6, Together. Y'all, this was a doozy. We have a lot to cover. Right up front, want to say hi to a few of our new patrons, including Trish Daly. So good to see you. And who is an offline friend of the pod as well. And so speaking of patrons, our May Day moment for this one is going to be about that legitimately shocking execution of Commander Putnam. So we're going to unpack it a little bit more. Our imprisonment and torture scholar, my esteemed colleague, is going to talk about the symbolism of it. And so make sure to join us over on our $5 a month Patreon for a discussion around that. Everything besides that happened in the episode will be in this main topic because it's one of those episodes we couldn't figure out anything else to lift. Yeah. Because everything is so connected. So in that way, I will say up front that I thought this was a very well executed episode of television. After their hiccup into the bowling alley last week, I was glad to see that they're back on track with what I thought season 5 was going to be. And even the decisions that characters made in this one that made me angry, they make sense in the sense-ish. We'll get into that. But, like, Luke pissed me off, but he makes sense. His emotional reactions make sense.
Right.
And we'll get into the fact that, as I said to Dr. Erin offline, that June and Serena are, like, the black holes of this universe. They just, like, whatever has to happen, but we'll get into that. Anything you want to say before I launch into the recap, my darling?
Let's go.
Okay, so we open up in the back of an armored car, and this is very obviously Luke's first rodeo at being imprisoned, so welcome.
Bless his wee cotton socks.
He just keeps freaking out. We established right off the bat that this isn't Gilead, which we surmised last week, thanks to everybody who commented, we'll hold our comments because you're all adorable and we love you, thank you. But I had a feeling, even at this moment, that it was connected to Wheeler somehow, I'll be honest. Yeah. And so that reveal wasn't particularly surprising to me personally. No. It made a lot of sense. And then speaking of Wheeler, go ahead.
I just wanted to interject real quick that I love the sides of June that we're getting, like her analytical side of like how deeply she understands Gilead. Yeah. And like she is the Gilead translator for like Luke. And I just love that he was like, "Is this Gilead?" And she was like, "No, chemicals." They would never use chemicals. I
love that little detail. Like, it smells too chemically. Yeah.
I was like, and like, of course she knows Gilead. Of course she understands Gilead. She was in prison there for who knows how long. But I'm really enjoying those little like drops where she's just, and especially like the conversations with her and Luke and where she like jokes about the different kinds of cages she's been in. This is the June that we loved. And I understand we had to detour into dark June, trauma June for a long time. We both feel it was too long. But I'm happy to see like that she's working herself back into being our June again.
Yeah. And speaking of like coming back, I'm glad we're seeing season 2 Serena again. So then after we do this kind of tete-a-tete with imprisonment central, we head over to another form of imprisonment, which is Serena in the Wheeler's house. And one of the things I wrote down is like I could really do without the constant like drone footage of the staircase. Like that happened a few too many times. My guess is that their symbolism is that it was like, you know, she's locked in a tower and we want to like understand all of that. Fine. It was like one or two too many times for me.
Yeah, I think they're paralleling the Waterford's house in Gilead.
Yes, especially with the shot of her crying and they pull out from the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the house just looks very similar, and they're shooting it like the Waterford's house in Gilead was always darker, like the literal paint on the wall was darker, but yeah, I think that's what they're doing because they loved the staircase at the Waterford's house as well, like visually.
Got it. I forgot about that. So that makes sense. But what we find out is that she thinks she's going for her sonogram, and a whole well visit, and that she discovers, as do we, that the Waterfords have built a birthing suite into the Waterfords, the Wheelers, Walkers, whoever. It's very rough for me right now because the Phillies have a pitcher named Wheeler, and they also have a really, then there's a couple other baseball players, the last name of Walker. And this is a bad timing for me to have to connect the word Wheeler to evil because I need Zach Wheeler to pitch very well.
To not be evil. Yeah.
To not be evil. So this is a rough time for me.
And it's, clearly I think they're a little too on the nose with having Serena's captors last name start with a W as well, which was just I understand why they're doing it, but it's also unkind.
To us recappers, especially, yes. So, yes. At the Wheelers, she is creeped out as she should be. The doctor is a little too friendly, and a little too something. And then he asks her out when his hands had just been in her, in a medical and professional capacity. Which I thought was poor timing.
Yeah, it's not great.
But also in a way that, she then has a conversation with Mrs. Wheeler where we discover that, Serena's consent was never an issue. This is, they're just kind of allowing her maybe to choose which man she's going to be yoked to, but not if she's going to be yoked to somebody. They obviously don't see her as a widow, and single parents are never allowed in Gilead. No. And so this, again, is Serena thinking she's the exception to every rule. So I'm sure there was a part of me that felt like Mrs. Wheeler was quoting Serena back to Serena. That was in a book Serena wrote, that was in one of the arguments she made. Because it was just so... that piece, all of it is what makes Serena finally crack. And we see her sobbing in her room.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting to see how Serena has changed her perspective now that she is carrying a child. Yeah. And this is the woman who, whether she believed it or not, we would never categorize her as a true believer of Gilead, completely. She was the one that insisted on stealing children from parents who were deemed unworthy, ill-equipped, incapable of being parents, to place them in a two-parent home. Mm-hmm. None of those children were placed with just a wife or just a commander. That doesn't exist in Gilead, aside from Larry, who just gets to do what he wants because he's Bradley Whitford.
Which is not a bad law of the universe to live by, so I approve.
It's not at all. Josh Lyman gets to write his own rules, folks. We don't make the rules. He does. But yeah, it's fascinating to see her then she was like, well, I wasn't planning on getting married. She was like, but you can't be a single mother. And the fact that Serena Waterford is well, of course I should be a single mother. Is just, this cognitive dissonance is fascinating. Full credit to Kathleen Walsh at Vulture, who I will reference probably several times because she's a better writer than I am. But she noticed the parallel between of cutting flowers, and we had a scene of Serena and June cutting flowers in the Waterfords when they were both still in Gilead. And so literally just putting Serena back in that position and then being sent to her room. And I'm not going to lie, y'all, when she was crying in her room, I was screaming at the television, do you remember all the times that you locked June in her room, you harpy? And I felt better about it.
I just wrote, that meltdown is right on time.
Yeah. So we've had some conversations with some of our patrons about Serena and where she's going, and where the show can go with Serena, whether she gets her comeuppance or is redeemed, although Bruce Miller has said he doesn't believe in redemption. So I don't know where they're going with her, but I felt bad for her and also delighted that she was in that position. But I think that was the crystallizing moment where she realized, like, I got to get out of this place.
So this is really where the episode takes a couple, like, there's really two parallel storylines happening. So we're going to have what's happening in Gilead and what's happening outside of Gilead converge into two stories instead of a bunch of stories. So let's track with Gilead really quickly. We find out that Esther is pregnant, which I will say the looks on Anne Dowd's face as Lydia processes this information is a reminder that A, they've decided to make the testaments and Lydia has a journey to take, and B, that even as a human being, I think if they hadn't decided it, as a character, Lydia had to do something.
Yeah.
Like, you don't, even if you cast Anne Dowd and thought she could play a two-dimensional character, for the last 5 years, she hasn't been. So, like, you have to do something with Lydia. And if you want to make us believe that little speech she just gave to Janine, which they do in the Previously On to remind us that she gave it, is that she wants to view these girls like humans and not just walking vessels. Because, as we have said many times, in her core, she does believe they are. And she believes that this is the deepest service that they can give, that this is their calling onto God. And just a small kind of aside, I've met and have loved a lot of people that firmly believe that a woman's role is a very specific thing. And they believe that out of love for what they perceive of as love for women. And what they perceive as giving women power. Because in their worldview, the most important job of humanity is to propagate the species. And so in protecting women's bodies and women's character and women's everything else, you are actually in that logic strain giving respect and duty and power to those women.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that level of cognitive dissonance does often lead to things, and we're seeing this in the current American political environment, of like the justification of forced birth, in a lot of ways, because that's a separate worldview. So
yeah,
again, like, just wanted to bring that up. Lydia, however, part of that very narrowly constructed worldview for Lydia in particular, and for a lot of other people, is that sex has to happen in a very specific manner and way. And what Esther's pregnancy proves is that Commander Putnam violated what she believed of was the law of God, because the ceremony in Lydia's mind is not rape. The ceremony is these girls fulfilling their calling onto God. What Lydia has not ever realized until this exact moment, it appears, is that not all the commanders agree with her.
Yeah.
I wonder, like, how she squares the Jezebel circle in her head. Like, she has to know it exists.
She has to know it exists.
Like, I wonder how she does that. But my impression was that was the very first time it ever occurred to her that a commander with that much power, who had been around for that long, would do something like this.
Yeah.
Even though to us, it's the natural out. Like, you give these girls to them like property, of course they're going to do this kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about it while you were talking just then, and kind of trying to remember back to earlier seasons of Lydia that we've gotten. And I think what we're seeing from her is what happens when there start to be chinks in your worldview.
Yeah, this is especially in your faith.
Yeah, and so, get the Lydia, militaristic, obstinate, abusive Lydia that we got in, seasons 1 through whatever, certainly seasons 1 and 2, was the system was working aside from the June, who was just an anomaly. And so she could justify maintaining the system, and June just being like a troublesome handmaid. And then Emily starts, to be troublesome as well. And then, oh, well, she's just whatever, gay. So there's something wrong with her. So they send her to the colonies. But then, we get the handmaid operation that like the suicide bomb at the commander's meeting. And I think it's been a snowball effect of this. And she has always loved Janine as a human more than any of the other ones. And I think, they were real explicit that seeing Janine that broken broke Lydia.
Yeah.
And I think now she has all these other things in her head. And, she allowed Jezebels to happen because they were making babies. So she can compartmentalize with the best of them, our Lydia. But I think for a person that is that devout.
Yeah.
And is that... and her faith is attached to justice. In a way that we don't see from necessarily everyone else. She's always about, you follow the rules, you will be rewarded. You break the rules, you will be punished. And, I guess now she's decided that breaking the rules as a commander is not acceptable. Because she has made this promise to Janine. She made that promise to God. She said, do not punish me by doing this to her. I promise I'll be better. She bargained with God. And
like she
and
is
she
the
believes
epitome
it.
of having an Old Testament faith, as we would say in
yeah.
Christianity. Like her God is one of justice, of vengeance, of punishment. Grace is not part of her conversation because grace does not enter the chat until the New Testament. So if you don't do the Gospels, it's mercy, but that's different than grace. God is merciful to those who are faithful to him, as the Hebrew Israelite understood him to be. And so, I think that was a really good, well-raised point. So what we get then is, in her justice, she marches directly to Lawrence and says, so Putnam raped her. And Lawrence is like, your point is. So...
And
yes, and. And again, it's another, when we do our trampoline talk, where we talk about your worldview being a worldview of yourself being a trampoline, instead of a brick wall, we talk about it for reasons like what Lydia is facing right now. Mm-hmm. Her existence is a brick wall. And over time, nearly every brick wall is going to, like, the mortar is going to crumble. And what's happening with her right now is people are just, like, pulling bricks out.
Yeah.
And there's not going to be a wall left at a certain point. And so, and what I think in a very real way, what Larry does in that conversation is rip one of the foundational bricks out and just say, this was never about making babies. By the way, in case you're wondering, this was always about creepy old men who look like Warren Jeffs. Thank you very much, Amy.
Thank you, Amy.
For saying out loud what I've been thinking but couldn't articulate. It was always about him just getting his rocks off.
Yeah.
So.
And, we say this every episode this season, and for half the episodes last season, we have no idea where the zero fucks Larry is going.
Ever.
Still. And so, it just continued to be fascinated and slightly uncomfortable boy wherever he's going. But I love the zero fucks in him where he's just like, I'm not going to pretend. I'm not, y'all can keep pretending that Gilead is what you think it is. Or, you know, create a version of Gilead in your head that makes you sleep better at night. But no, it's always been about allowing men to do whatever they want to women. Like,
and I think one
Lydia.
of the reasons we both love him is that, like, that's a little bit of how we are as people.
Yeah.
Is like, here's the red pill or the blue pill. You can take that blue pill. That's your call, man.
Yeah.
But we're going to keep telling you the red pill is real. So.
Yeah. And, you know, I think he's a fascinating character in that he clearly has some moral lines.
Yeah.
But we're not always sure where they are. And boy, are they shifting all the time. Because he certainly allows a lot of terrible things to happen as well. But then he does draw lines in the sand, and boy, did he draw one in this episode.
Yeah, he is the only true politician in this show.
Yeah.
Other people are, oh no, that's not true. Serena and he are the true politicians in this show.
Yeah. Like old school American politicians, not just
Yeah.
like power hungry Galadian commanders.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And I think it's another reason people really resonate with him as Commander Lawrence is I don't care whatever he does for the rest of his life, he is Josh Lyman to all of us. And so
Yeah.
this is Galadian Josh Lyman. This is how
It
Josh
is.
would behave.
It's super Josh Lyman energy. He just channels him.
And so I'm like, okay.
It's white-haired Galadian Josh Lyman, and I'm
Josh
not
Lyman.
sorry about it. I'm not
Who is
upset about
grieving
it.
because Donna couldn't have a kid. So like we can smash
Bless.
these things together.
Bless, we are.
The world fell apart when Leo McGarry died. So here we go. Okay, so then what happens is that Larry is forced to be in a like cigar and bourbon evening with this show does a great job of essentially telling us that if you smoke cigars, you are a terrible human, which is not true, but like it's a good trope in this show because it's a good shorthand. Or at least you are being forced to deal with horrible humans. So Putnam is like, what of it? Like, of course I did. By the way, Larry, like, New Bethlehem is dead. I'm the most virile commander. I'm incredible. And so then, following the storyline, what happens is we go to a country club where poor Mrs. Putnam is just trying to live her life. And then a couple of eyes come up to their table, grab Commander Putnam, take him outside to the dais in front of the country club. So, like, everyone who's sitting at tables can see what is happening. Anyone who is outside the building can see what is happening. Lydia and Eyebrows and Larry are there. Lydia says, the eyes of the Lord are everywhere to keep watch on the wicked. Or Larry says that. One of the two of them says that, but it's a verse, I think, from Ezekiel. I forgot to Google. I'm sorry. And they have a whole little thing. Creepy commander's like, you can't do this to me. Larry's like, and yet I can. Nick takes out a gun and shoots him, execution style, in his forehead in front of all of Gilead.
Yeah, and as we said,
and I legit went, holy shit.
Yeah, I only would have been happier if they had castrated him first. But it's not really a point to castrate a person who's going to be dead anyway. But I just would have felt better about it.
I would have felt better if he physically suffered a little bit more, like somehow. But I was just so shocked it happened that I was like, okay.
Yeah, and as we said at the beginning, this is going to be our Mayday moment, so I don't want to talk too much about it, but I do want to say, like, Larry and Nick show up and say that there was a super secret session of the High Court of Gilead, and he was found guilty of apostasy.
Oh, yeah, we got to talk about apostasy.
We do. For the rape of unassigned property. So the loophole that they found was that, Esther hadn't been assigned yet. She was there visiting to see if they would suit. So if, like, that all fits, that all tracks with Galadian law and how they think about these things. And apostasy is a capital punishment in Gilead. It was what Nick's first wife was publicly drowned for. The child bride. That was a rough time in all of our lives, but she was also found guilty of apostasy and the guardian that she had fallen in love with or in lust with, whatever. So, yeah, I don't know if you have anything you want to say about apostasy specifically, but we'll talk more about the public execution of a commander in the Mayday moment, but I was absolutely shocked. Very few things on this show have shocked me in the last 3 seasons, and I was gobsmacked that happened. So hat tip to Bruce Miller and whoever decided that this was going to happen, because I was blown away.
Apostasy is crimes against God. So that's the treason is crime against the state in wartime. Sedition is crime against the state in peacetime. Apostasy is crime against God in all times.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what that is. I'll just make that reminder.
Yeah, that's the argument that Lydia made to Larry.
Yeah.
Was
it's a crime against God.
It's a crime against God.
Gilead is a crime against God, but let bygones be bygones. So then what we get next is that Eyebrows heads home. Rose is very disturbed by the fact that Eyebrows is the one that executed him. We have a lot of questions about Rose and what Rose knows and how Rose sees the world. We also find out that Rose is pregnant. Congratulations to Rose and Eyebrows.
Felicitations.
There's a really interesting conversation to be had here, we think. And I don't want to get into it too much because I actually want to see this play out a little bit more. But my theory is that what they're showing us with Rose and Eyebrows are the second generation of Gilead leadership. And
age-wise, yeah.
Age-wise, yeah.
We still haven't gotten Nick's full backstory, but he was involved from the jump, but he is not one of the old white men.
Yeah, so they are the second generation of commanders and wives, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we see this a lot in diasporic communities, in revolutionary movements, that the first immigrant wave, the first, whatever, tend to be very militant. And we see this in founders of companies, that they stick very, very closely to their vision. And the generation that comes in behind them, whatever that vision is. For some immigrant communities, that vision is assimilation. For some power communities, that vision is the military and total power, i.e. Brazil. Whatever their vision is, they stick really closely to it. And the second generation goes, okay, so, And they kind of have a little bit more of a, okay, we understand this was your vision, but this is how it's actually been working while you haven't, for the people who aren't in power. And so it's a little bit messier. They're less true believers in that vision, just by the nature of a different developmental age when the vision was put in place.
Yeah.
And so my theory is that that's what they're trying to show us with Rose and Nick, that Rose is the child of a commander, but how many of us pastors, I'm not a pastor's kid, but I love a lot of pastors' kids. Our faith looks totally different than our parents.
Yeah.
And so I she's the missionary kid in this scenario. And so has it even occurred to her that she can believe differently? I don't know. That's a developmental phase of religious children in parents who are in leadership. So I'm interested. I could wax a lot longer, but I'm just going to say that and allow Aaron any comments before I wrap up this story.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and we talked about this offline, that Nick is a weird part of this, but yeah, he was there at the start of Gilead. He was a soldier, and part of the important. I don't remember what Serena said when she told us hints to it, but he was a soldier and he was elevated to a commander. So he is not, I would argue, part of the first generation of commanders, even though he's been around since the beginning. He's kind of new. He is new leadership. And Rose, by being married to him, is new leadership. And so we've seen them. It's fascinating that, like, Rose knows enough about him to know his relationship with June, but maybe doesn't still fully understand him. And
may not know about Nicole, because we've never heard her mention Nicole. So may not know about his daughter.
He has always been the muscle for Gilead. That's how he got started. So not at all shocked that it was never going to be Larry that was going to shoot Putnam between the eyes. But we also got Jaden, who hopefully survives having his leg blown off, but is a young kid who has this, like, murky relationship with Gilead. We've got Esther, who is a child wife, and has a not murky relationship with Gilead, but is, not indoctrinated in that way. So I think it's really interesting that they're like stretching the categories of people in Gilead, and things are breaking down. This is a cumulative effect again of the handmaids escaping, the flight working, June being June all over the place and Juning wherever she Junes, and then ending up in Canada and being alive, and, like, all of that has a cumulative effect on the psyche of the nation. And as you said, chipping away at that big old brick wall of identity. But this younger generation is always going to have a more malleable identity and relationship to the nation state as well. So I'm fascinated. I don't know what they're doing with it. I agree with you. Aside from just describing that we think it's happening, I don't know that we can go any further until they show us more. But I'm enjoying I think it was too many seasons of just, like, the obstinate, creepy Gilead commanders and the wives just, like, towing the line. So I'm glad they're showing us some dissenting thoughts, possibly.
I mean, isolation is how you keep totalitarian regimes in line.
Yeah.
And they're not actually that isolated, Mm-hmm. So, like, North Korea thrives because it's Russia on one side and South Korea on the other, and South Korea doesn't want to make waves. And Rwanda's really remote, and
yeah,
you're physically in North America. Canada's right there, Mexico's right there. The world knows where you are. It's very difficult to maintain, I think, a complete totalitarian dictatorship for very long.
Yeah.
And a generation, maybe two, and that's kind of it. So in my mind, Gilead always had an end date. Even beyond the fact that, like, I'm an optimist and I believe the arc of the universe bends towards justice because that's who I am. But, like, politically, it's always going to have an end game.
Yeah.
Even without the Juning of the world. So, but anyway, what we finished this particular storyline with is that Putnam goes on the wall, and Lydia takes the handmaids on a field trip to the wall. And we'll talk more about that and about what Janine said and everything else in the Mayday moment. So join us for that.
Yep.
Now let's go back to Serena.
Yeah.
So Serena somehow convinces... Oh, no, I'm sorry. Rewind. I thought I said this. We get absolute confirmation that June was captured by one of Wheeler's men, because Walker are the chips, Wheeler is the commander. Wheeler's men, because he says to her, "We have June Osborne."
Yeah, they did. And they fingerprinted her.
We have June Osborne. And she starts to cry. And at that point, I think it could be like 45 different reasons that she's crying. There's relief, there's... there's hope that it's over. And I think there's also a little part of her that's like, oh, this could be my escape plan. Yeah. And so, because if anyone could get me out of this, it's June. Mm-hmm. So she talks Wheeler into letting her go and be the one that shoots June.
Oh, to witness it. She said she just needs to witness it. Yeah.
And then she talks Ezra into being the one to shoot June. And this is what I meant by these two women are the black holes. Like, things just happen around them that aren't necessarily logical, but the logic of the show is that they get whatever they want to make the storyline move forward. Yep. So, therefore, what happens is logical.
Yeah,
And at no
before
point...
before you
Okay.
keep going, I want to just say real quick, Kathleen Walsh at Vulture had another fantastic encapsulation of exactly what you just said. She said, Serena and June are finally reunited in a highly strained and wonderfully bonkers assemblage of storylines. And I was like, yes.
Yep.
And continue.
So they drive out to the middle of nowhere. At no point in time did I think this ended with either Serena or June dying. So
Absolutely not.
But Yvonne is earning that Emmy reel by the conflict on her face. And what we get is that Serena shoots Ezra execution style and tells June to get in the car and drive. I actually wonder if Serena went into early labor.
Yeah, I think that's what they were hinting at, was that she was already having contractions.
Yeah, and if her water didn't break from the stress and trauma of that or what it is. And then they drive, and we know from the previews that they end up in a barn. And Aaron and I are deeply hoping for a bottle episode where it's just the two of them in a barn hashing all of this out. Because reminder, it would make a lot of sense that that's where Serena gives birth to her kid in the storyline of this show, because June gave birth to Nicole by herself in a house, abandoned, in a bottle episode. So, this all makes sense. I'm not I'm never upset when shows don't surprise me. So I did think that I was a little bit surprised at the acceleration of the Serena escape storyline. I thought maybe we had 2 or 3 more episodes of her trying to negotiate things. And but when the doctor asked her out is when I kind of knew, like, oh no, this is accelerating. Like, no, we're getting out of here.
Yeah, when Mrs. Wheeler turned real quick, and said, "Go to your room." I honestly think that's when Serena was like, I got to get out of this place any way that I can. So no, I wasn't surprised. Especially that we brought these two magnets together once again. That was always going to happen, even if they are highly strained and wonderfully bonkers storylines that get them there. And I'm not upset about it, because please, please, please just give us the two of them in that barn and let them say all the things, because those two actors feed off each other so well, and some of the best scenes like we've ever gotten in this show are between the two of them. And you know, when we back in the days when we used to complain that June should have died, because like biologically she should have, at the end of season 3, and we got a lot of comments that like, you can't have the Handmaid's Tale without the Handmaid. I mean, it is the Handmaid's Tale, but like, you can't have it without Serena either.
Yeah, and our point at the time was you could have picked another handmaid. And that's when Bruce Miller started doing interviews that was like, this is June's story. And I was like, so call it the June tale. But when he went all in on June, this is how this story had to end, is the two of them together. Yeah.
And I think we don't know what happened to Ezra. He appeared to get shot like in the shoulder in a bulletproof vest. So I don't think he's dead. I think he's probably going to be leading the hunt for the vessel that is Serena Waterford, and June. And you know, I think there's a lot of things happening in Serena's brain. And I think Yvonne did such a great job of showing that. I think there was a part of her that thought she might kill June. I think there was a part of her that was happy that she got captured and that they were planning to kill her. But she's super conflicted about it. And you're right. She knew June, who has escaped any shackles Gilead has put on her, would be able to get Serena out of the clutches of the Wheelers. And so she started hatching her plan. And, you know, I'm loving that we're seeing that the smart people prevail in this. Even if I don't like Serena, she's smarter than 90% of the people in this show. June is smarter, Larry is smarter, and like, underestimate her at your peril. It doesn't make sense to me at all that the Mr. Wheeler that stood there and forced her to take prenatal vitamins in front of him would agree after a few tears for her to go on a journey to the no man's land to watch June be killed, but it had to happen. I don't know in what world.
I think they just figured they broke her. That's my, like, she wouldn't dare, Ezra is there. Like, to me, that's almost like an act of hubris.
Yeah.
Like, he just felt like everything was totally fine and under control and handled.
Yeah. But I'm excited about where that's going. I heard, and I meant to go back and watch, but I'm presuming that you heard this as well. When Luke and June were separated, the weird militia people said they don't want him. He's legal. Drop him at the border. Did you hear that? Yeah, okay, because a lot of my mom was like, where are they taking Luke? And I was like, to the border. And then somebody else online was like, where are they taking Luke? And I was like, they're just going
to the border.
I think Luke's fine. I think they're just going to literally drop him across from Camp Mayday and be like, because this is clearly some kind of operation where they take people who would be wanted by Gilead.
Yep.
And return them to Gilead. So I don't know what's I think Luke is going to be fine. I think he'll get like back to Mayday and back to Moira, and then whether or not Luke and June will be reunited again in this season, we will have to wait and see. I loved a lot of their interactions in the cages. I did not love Luke being a dude about it, but as you said, it fits 100% with Luke as a character. Especially the Luke that got emotionally eviscerated by Serena at the cultural center, thus prompting him to go on this ill-advised journey into no man's land. June teaching Luke how to be a prisoner was at times uncomfortable and also hilarious. The joke about Airbnb, like once she got him through his nonsense, you see how much of a team they really are and always have been. Kristen and I both like June and Nick better together, but I don't think that's where the show is going, so we'll have to reconcile ourselves to Luke. He probably frustrated me the most in this episode, but it all made sense with him. And he really needs to maybe go to therapy on his own and like do some reflection about why he needs to be quote unquote the man. I did not need to see a black man almost strangled by militia on television. Thank you so much. But why not reference George Floyd while we're just kicking around in the abandoned building with cages?
Yeah, I think it's exactly who those people are. A lot, as several of our commenters and Patreons have pointed out, like those militiamen were very stylized, like the people that stormed the Capitol on the 6th, which would be, which tracks with people who would be okay with George Floyd's murder. Like that's kind of, they're shortcutting us in some ways there, which is this story is about a police state. Mm-hmm. We just dressed it up in theology, like it's a police state. So I think it's really fascinating. It's a good reminder as well, as we've said a million times about the Wheelers, that Gilead is an idea, not just a legislative body. So I am stoked for the next episode for the simple fact that I want Yvonne and Elizabeth to just have fun and chew every inch of scenery they are given. Yeah. And I hope they hash this out. And it's just going to be interesting. I think we might actually be together to watch this episode, which would be wild to be able to do that together of all the episodes. So, but I think I'll hit pause here, and we're going to see you guys for whenever we do get to talk about the birth in the barn. And I'm sure I will have a million thoughts on the alliteration, the allusion to the Messiah story of the Messiah of Gilead being born in a barn in Canada. And if Bethlehem comes into that in any way, shape, or form, it's going to be really interesting. Can't wait. So, In the meantime, until we see you again, I think our hope for you, we only do these occasionally, but sometimes I just really feel the need to do them, and today is one of those days. So our hope for you is that you are somewhere that is safe, both physically and emotionally, and that your consent is respected, unlike Esther's. So,
Lord.
see you guys later.
Bye, everybody.